I've gathered a good amount of information on ICL and the 2900 series, including its formation, government involvement, the technical aspects of the 2900, its initial success, the challenges it faced due to its proprietary nature, and its eventual decline and acquisition. I also have details on the internal debates and the influence of nationalistic policies. Now I will structure the script into the requested chapters and start drafting the narration, adhering to all formatting and stylistic rules. Chapter outline. 1. Opening hook. The Ghost in the Machine narrator's personal discovery and initial reaction to the story of ICL and its almost future. 2. Chapter 1. Britannia's digital dream, the post-war ambition, Britain's early lead in computing, and the political will to create a national champion in ICL in 1968. 3. Chapter 2. The Giant's Shadow, IBM and the Drive for Independence, the dominance of IBM, the strategic imperative to create a British alternative and the initial products inherited by ICL. 4. Chapter 3. The New Range, a fork in the architectural road, the conceptualization of the 2900 series, internal debates between open and proprietary designs, and the government's strong influence towards a unique British system. 5. Chapter 4. The 2900 series, innovation and isolation, the launch of the 2900, its technical strengths as a proprietary system, and the immediate market reception, alongside the emerging challenges of its closed nature. 6. Chapter 5. The Unraveling Thread, Decline in a Changing World, the increasing difficulty of competing with open standards, the costs of proprietary software and hardware, and the loss of global competitiveness in the late 1970s and 1980s. 7. Closing Reflection. Echoes in the Silicon Age, lessons from ICL's story for today's tech policy, nationalism, and the importance of open standards. 8. Call to action. I will now proceed with writing the narration, ensuring it meets all the specified requirements. Asterisk, opening hook, narrator's reaction to discovering this story. 2-3 Min. I stumbled upon this story almost by accident, buried in the footnotes of a broader history of computing. It was a detail, a mere paragraph about a British computer company from the 1970s, a name I barely recognized, ICL. And yet, the more I dug, the more I realized I wasn't looking at a footnote at all. I was looking at a grand, almost Shakespearean tragedy, a story of national ambition, brilliant engineering, and a fatal decision that would echo for decades. It captivated me immediately. We often hear tales of Silicon Valley legends, of visionary founders in garages, or of the rise of global tech behemoths. But this was different. This was about a nation, Britain, trying to carve out its own destiny in the nascent world of digital technology, fighting against an unstoppable tide with a government mandate as its shield. What struck me was the sheer audacity of the vision, coupled with a deep, almost painful irony. Here was a company, born from the best intentions, given immense resources and a clear mission, to create a computer champion that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the American giants, particularly IBM. And they almost did. They produced truly innovative machines, pushing boundaries in system architecture and operating systems. But there was a point, a critical juncture, where a choice was made, a path taken that would ultimately doom their global aspirations. It was a choice influenced not just by engineering necessity, but by a powerful, perhaps even misguided, sense of national pride and self-reliance. They chose to go it alone, to build a proprietary, closed system, at a time when the world was slowly, inexorably, moving towards openness. As I pieced together the fragments of this forgotten history, the internal debates, the government pressures, the engineers who saw the writing on the wall but were ultimately overruled, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of loss. What if they had chosen differently? What if those dissenting voices within ICL had prevailed? Would the landscape of global computing look different today? This isn't just a story about a computer company or a specific piece of hardware. It is a story about the choices we make, the forces that shape them, and the long, often unforeseen consequences that ripple through time, shaping industries, economies, and even national identities. This is the story of Britain's ICL and the government order that killed a computer giant's future. Chapter 1. Britannia's Digital Dream for 6 Men. To truly understand the rise and eventual decline of ICL, we must first transport ourselves back to post-war Britain, a nation grappling with a new world order, yet still imbued with a fierce spirit of innovation. Britain, after all, was no stranger to pioneering computing. Long before the commercial boom, figures like Charles Babbage in the 19th century laid conceptual groundwork. And during World War II, Alan Turing and Tommy Flowers developed the Colossus machines at Bletchley Park, a groundbreaking electronic digital computer that played a critical role in cracking enemy codes. After the war, British universities like Manchester and Cambridge continued to push the boundaries, with machines like the Small-Scale Experimental Machine, or BABY, running its first program in June 1948, followed by EDSAC in May 1949, which became the first commercial computer. These early achievements solidified Britain's position at the forefront of the nascent computing field. However, translating this academic and wartime brilliance into commercial success proved to be a far greater challenge. By the 1960s, the landscape was already dominated by American giants, particularly IBM. The British government, recognizing the strategic importance of a domestic computer industry, grew increasingly concerned about this reliance on foreign technology. There was a strong political will to foster a national champion, a British answer to IBM, to ensure self-reliance and maintain technological sovereignty. This ambition culminated in 1968 under Harold Wilson's Labour government with the passing of the Industrial Expansion Act. This act facilitated the merger of several existing British computer manufacturers into a single, unified entity, International Computers Limited, or ICL. It was a government-orchestrated, some might say shotgun marriage, bringing together International Computers and Tabulators, English Electric Computers, and Elliott Automation. The stated mission for ICL was clear: rationalize its range of computers, bulk up its research and development output, and compete effectively with IBM. ICL was not a small endeavor. From its inception, it generated £100 million of annual revenue and employed 34,000 people, instantly becoming the world's largest non-American computer manufacturer. The government even took a 10.5% stake in the company and provided £10 million in funding for research and development. This initial government support also extended to a preferential procurement policy, effectively forcing government agencies to buy ICL products if they met the requirements. In its first year, ICL reportedly secured 97.6% of the government's computer orders, a testament to this protected market. The intention was noble, driven by a desire to preserve and grow Britain's technological base. But this forced consolidation, while creating a larger entity, also brought together a diverse and often incompatible collection of technologies and corporate cultures. ICL inherited two main product lines: the ICT 1900 series and English Electric System for range. The 1900 series, while successful, was technically outdated, using 6-bit characters in a 24-bit world. The System 4, on the other hand, was an IBM-compatible mainframe derived from the RCA Spectra 70. These incompatible architectures presented an immediate challenge and necessitated a fresh start. From these foundations, the dream of a truly British mainframe, a new range of computers, began to take shape. Chapter 2. The Giant's Shadow, IBM and the Drive for Independence for 6 Men. The computing world of the late 1960s and early 1970s was utterly dominated by one name: IBM. Their System 360 had become the de facto industry standard, a powerful, versatile, and widely adopted mainframe architecture that cast a long shadow over every other manufacturer. For any company, let alone a nascent national champion like ICL, attempting to compete meant directly confronting this colossus. IBM's sheer market share, technological prowess, and extensive ecosystem of software and services made it a formidable rival. For Britain, this dominance presented a significant geopolitical and economic challenge. Dependence on a single foreign supplier for such critical infrastructure as national computing systems was seen as a vulnerability. The idea of a national computer champion, like ICL, was not merely about economic competition. It was deeply intertwined with national security, industrial policy, and a desire for technological self-determination. The British government's involvement in ICL's formation and ongoing support was a direct response to this perceived threat of IBM's hegemony. ICL, upon its formation, inherited a complex and somewhat fragmented product portfolio. The ICT 1900 series, though popular with existing customers and financially viable, was based on an older, non-standard architecture. There was internal pressure within ICL to phase out the 1900, as it was considered technically out of date. However, political pressure from the Labour government prevented this, partly because the System 4, the other inherited mainframe line, was not considered truly British-made, being a licensed design from RCA. This early intervention highlighted the tension between commercial realities and nationalistic sentiment that would plague ICL throughout its existence. The ambition for ICL was not just to build computers, but to build British asterisk computers, designed and manufactured within the United Kingdom. This nationalistic imperative, while understandable in its historical context, inadvertently set the stage for a critical divergence from emerging global trends. While IBM's success was built on a relatively open, though proprietary, architecture that allowed a vast ecosystem to flourish around it, the drive for British self-reliance pushed ICL towards a more insular path. The government's preferential procurement policy, which largely ensured ICL a significant portion of the public sector market, provided a crucial initial boost. In its first year, ICL captured nearly 98% of government computer orders. This captive market, however, also fostered a certain complacency and limited the direct competitive pressures that might have forced different architectural decisions. As Ninian Eady, a former ICL sector manager for government, defense, and universities, recalled, the government was a big customer for ICL as they had a procurement policy of buying from the British company. But for other sectors, particularly large financial institutions, the main competitor was still IBM because they felt safer with the larger company. This early dichotomy underscored the challenge. Could ICL truly compete on a global scale if its primary advantage was a government mandate rather than inherent market leadership or architectural alignment? The answer to that question would profoundly shape the development of its new range of computers. The 2900 series. Chapter 3. The New Range, a fork in the architectural road for 6 men, with a mandate to create a truly unified and modern computer family. ICL embarked on Project New Range immediately after its formation in 1968. The explicit goal was to develop a novel computer architecture, unencumbered by the legacy systems ICL had inherited, and to directly challenge rivals like IBM's System 360. This was a bold undertaking, a chance to define Britain's computing future. Internal debates within ICL were intense, reflecting a genuine intellectual struggle over the best path forward. Engineers and strategists were well aware of the dominance of IBM's architecture, and some voices advocated for a more modular, open design that could potentially interoperate or at least compete more easily within a broader industry ecosystem. There were discussions about developing enhancements to either the 1900 series or the System 4, or even exploring designs based on innovative academic work like J.K. Iliff's basic language machine. However, the option that ultimately prevailed was the synthetic option, a brand new design conceptualized from scratch, drawing influences from various sources, including earlier ICL machines, Burroughs mainframes, and the Multics system, but crucially, not designed for direct compatibility with any competitor's machines. The most significant external influence was the MU5 machine developed at Manchester University, a research project pushing the boundaries of computer architecture. This choice to develop a unique, proprietary architecture, the 2900 series, was driven by a powerful combination of factors. The government's vision of a national computer champion strongly favored self-reliance and a distinct British solution. There was a cultural inclination within ICL, rooted in its pioneering origins, to resist outside influence and embrace a not invented here mentality. This meant developing everything internally from the ground up, rather than adopting or adapting existing industry standards. While this fostered deep innovation and a unique identity, it also meant committing to a closed ecosystem at a time when the world was slowly gravitating towards more open standards and interoperability. The Labour government, particularly through its Ministry of Technology and later the National Enterprise Board, continued to play an active, interventionist role. In 1971, facing economic challenges, ICL received a substantial £40 million loan from the UK government to help fund the development of this new range. This financial backing was crucial, but it further cemented the government's influence over ICL's strategic direction. The political expectation was for ICL to produce a distinctly British architecture, a technological flag bearer for the nation. This meant a departure from designs that could have offered more flexibility. For instance, the System 4, inherited from English Electric, was IBM compatible, a path that could have provided a bridge to a wider market. However, political pressure ultimately protected the 1900 series and pushed for a new, independent design. The decision to build the 2900 series as a proprietary system, rather than aligning with or even embracing aspects of the dominant IBM architecture, was a defining moment. It was a choice born of national ambition, but one that carried significant long-term risks in a rapidly globalizing and standardizing industry. Chapter 4. The 2900 series, Innovation and Isolation, for 6 Men, on October 9, 1974 at its Kidsgrove facility in Staffordshire, England, ICL officially announced the 2900 series, marking the culmination of years of intense research and development. This was not merely an incremental upgrade. It was presented as a fourth-generation mainframe architecture, ambitious and technologically advanced, designed to carry ICL into the 1980s and directly compete with international rivals like IBM. The initial models, the 2980 and 2970, were powerful machines for their time. The 2980, for instance, could operate with 1 or 2 order code processors, each capable of up to 3 million instructions per second, with memory configurable up to 8 megabytes. A typical 2980 configuration in 1977 would have cost around £2 million. The 2900 series introduced several key innovations. It featured virtual machine support, segmented virtual storage, and stack-based procedural execution, enabling efficient multiprocessing and resource sharing. Its 32-bit word and 8-bit byte architecture diverged from prior ICL systems, aligning with some emerging industry standards, while still offering compatibility with older 1900 series systems via emulation through microprogrammed processors. The Virtual Machine Executive, or VME, operating system governed operations, incorporating protection levels to ensure secure, multi-user environments. Indeed, the 2900 series was designed with an emphasis on reliability, with features like redundant processing in higher-end models, targeting continuous operation for thousands of hours. Initial market reception, especially in the United Kingdom and some international markets like Australia, was quite positive. The 2903 model, a lower-end system, gained particular traction in Australia, becoming a commercial success. By 1980, over 3,2900 systems had been installed worldwide, making it ICL's most commercially successful product line to date and a key competitor to IBM's System 370 family. ICL's revenues grew by 20% per annum throughout the rest of the 1970s, a period often described as very good for the company. However, beneath this veneer of success, the very nature of the 2900's design, its proprietary, closed hardware architecture, began to sow seeds of future trouble. While technically innovative, the decision to build a system not directly compatible with the industry-leading IBM System 360 meant ICL was creating its own island in a rapidly expanding ocean. This synthetic option, while proudly British, meant ICL had to develop its entire ecosystem, from operating systems like VME to extensive application software, from scratch, without leveraging the broader industry developments that were coalescing around IBM's platform. The costs associated with developing this entirely new software stack were enormous, consuming over a third of ICL's entire research and development budget. Every new architecture required new operating systems, a burden that few companies could sustain indefinitely. This commitment to a proprietary path would prove increasingly isolating. As the 1970s progressed, the pace of technological change accelerated, particularly in semiconductor manufacturing. ICL found itself in a race against time, needing to continually invest massive resources to keep its unique hardware competitive and its software up to date, all while lacking the broad third-party support that a more open architecture might have attracted. The initial success masked a growing vulnerability, a self-imposed isolation that would eventually undermine its global competitiveness. Chapter 5. The Unraveling Thread. Decline in a Changing World for 6 Men. The success of the ICL 2900 series through the late 1970s proved to be a fleeting triumph. As the 1980s dawned, the fundamental flaw in ICL's proprietary, closed architecture became painfully apparent. The global computer industry was rapidly evolving, and the once clear lines between mainframe, minicomputer, and eventually personal computer were blurring. Open standards, modular designs, and interoperability were becoming increasingly critical for market penetration and innovation. ICL, with its unique and insular 2900 architecture, found itself at a severe disadvantage. The costs of maintaining a completely proprietary ecosystem were crippling. Developing, supporting, and updating the VME operating system and a full suite of software for a unique hardware platform required immense and continuous investment, a burden that was difficult for even a government-backed entity to sustain. This was compounded by the accelerating pace of semiconductor technology, where once a new product might have a 5 or 7 year lifespan, rapid advancements meant much shorter cycles, demanding constant research and development just to keep up. ICL could no longer compete effectively in this escalating technological arms race on its own. The government's initial preferential procurement policy, which had been so vital for ICL's early growth, began to erode. After Edward Heath's conservative government was elected in 1970, it initially opened the government market to competitive tendering, although it was forced to provide ICL with a £40 million loan in 1971 to prevent collapse. Even with subsequent Labour governments reaffirming some support, the principle of a captive market was weakening. Customers, no longer mandated to buy British, could choose from a wider array of options, often finding more flexible and cost-effective solutions from competitors, particularly IBM, whose System 370 and later 4,300 families were increasingly dominant. ICL started to struggle significantly in the late 1970s. By 1981, the company faced severe financial difficulties, recording a loss of £18.7 million. This crisis stemmed from delays in developing lower-end machines in the 2900 range to compete with IBM's 4300 series, coupled with a downturn in global demand due to a worldwide recession. There was even a takeover bid from the American mainframe company, Univac. The British government once again intervened with a loan guarantee, preventing the takeover and allowing ICL to remain independent. However, this intervention came with strings attached. Rob Wilmot was brought in as chief executive, and he made a crucial decision to cancel ICL's expensive in-house development of large-scale integrated circuit technology. Instead, ICL negotiated an agreement to access Fujitsu's semiconductor technology, a recognition that going it alone in core hardware development was unsustainable. This marked a significant shift, signaling the beginning of ICL's slow but inevitable integration into global supply chains and a gradual erosion of its British champion status. The overemphasis on the expensive mainframe industry also meant ICL largely missed out on the burgeoning minicomputer and later personal computer booms. While it made some moves, like acquiring Singer Business Machines in 1976 to gain its System 10 minicomputer, which was developed into the ICL System 25, these were not enough to reverse the tide. By the late 1980s, the writing was on the wall. Despite continued innovation within the 2900 architecture, such as the ICL Series 39, which adopted the same architecture on refreshed hardware and even utilized optical fibers for internal connections, the company was fighting an uphill battle. The global mainframe market was increasingly consolidated around IBM's entrenched ecosystem, which by the late 1990s captured over 70% of the global share. ICL's trajectory underscored a harsh reality. National champions, without rigorous exposure to international competition and a willingness to embrace open standards, struggled against firms prioritizing modular architectures and ecosystem lock-in. Eventually, the pressure became too great. In 1990, ICL became an autonomous subsidiary of the Japanese electronics giant Fujitsu. The acquisition marked the end of an era, foreshadowing the eventual cessation of mainframe production in the UK. While ICL continued to operate under the Fujitsu banner for some years, eventually becoming Fujitsu Services Limited in 2002, the dream of an independent British computer giant had faded. Closing reflection. What this story means today, 2-3 Min. The story of ICL and its 2900 series is a poignant reminder of the delicate balance between national ambition and global market realities in the tech industry. It's a narrative that resonates deeply today, as nations around the world grapple with questions of technological sovereignty, industrial policy, and competition with dominant global players. We see echoes of Britain's 1970s dilemma in contemporary debates about national champions in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, or semiconductor manufacturing. What can we learn from ICL's journey? Perhaps the most crucial lesson is the double-edged sword of a proprietary, closed architecture in a rapidly evolving, interconnected world. While it allowed for deeply integrated, highly optimized systems like the 2900, it ultimately isolated ICL from the network effects, third-party innovation, and economies of scale that open standards and interoperability offered. The insistence on a purely British solution, while understandable politically, overlooked the increasing need for a global perspective in technology. The "not invented here" syndrome, while fostering internal brilliance, also built walls around ICL, preventing it from adapting quickly to paradigm shifts. The role of government, too, is a critical takeaway. While essential in creating ICL and providing vital financial lifelines, the government's influence also steered the company towards decisions that, in hindsight, proved detrimental to its long-term global competitiveness. The pressure to prioritize nationalistic self-reliance over pragmatic engagement with emerging industry standards ultimately constrained ICL's future. It's a cautionary tale about how well-intended industrial policy can sometimes inadvertently hinder the very innovation and competitiveness it seeks to foster. Today, the tech landscape is far more complex, but the underlying principles remain. Companies that thrive are often those that build ecosystems, foster communities, and embrace interoperability. They understand that while innovation is key, connectivity is equally, if not more, powerful. The story of ICL reminds us that even with brilliant engineers and significant government backing, a technological path chosen in isolation can lead to an inevitable decline. A powerful lesson from a forgotten corner of tech history. Subscribe if you want more stories like this.